Okay, so the deal is on this podcast, sometimes we cuss. If you're offended of cussing, then just, I don't know, give us a chance, but, you know, whatever, cussing, blah, blah, blah. My name is Ben. This other person is Richard. And when we combine to form Reef Beef. Welcome to Reef Beef. Today, we're going to talk about skeptical versus cynical. We're going to talk about UV coming from metal halides. We're going to talk about some other stuff and some other things. I'm going to beef about ICP. And I want to thank our sponsors, saltwateraquarium.com, Champion Lighting and Supply, and PolypLab. Richard.
Ben.
What's going on, man?
I'm wearing this and I think I have to take it off because it's just weird.
But I can hear you clearly.
Can you? Should I leave it on? I think, well, it is.
Or at least
it is like, what are we, like 35% of I can't wear this. It's itching my face.
Oh, will it flip up above your head?
I can wear it like that. It's like a turban.
It's an octopus turban.
An octo turban. Wow, look at this goat. Holy crap. I got a big ass beard.
So, Richard.
Benjamin.
First off, is there anything new going on with your tanks?
There's so much going on with my tanks again.
So exciting and new.
I am prepping. There's a couple things. I'm prepping for the spawning this year. So I'm looking at the tanks behind me and moving things around. The babies from December and November are growing up, and I have to move some things around in their tank. And then I have to build some equipment for the spawn. Not a big deal, but I have to be thinking about it now. After the STN event in my tank, in the display, I have been doing stuff in that tank and had to move some things around, and I'm starting to love the tank again, so that's nice. Awesome. Things are looking really good. I've started feeding. I've become a fan now of turning off the flow for feeding my NPS. So I had a bunch of dendros that didn't like to open, and I'm trying to figure out why they won't open. And so I would turn off all the flow in the tank and then pour TDO from it's a
Reef Nutrition.
Yeah, it's a pellet food that's by Reef Nutrition that's that I like, and I get a good feeding response for it with my NPS, and I just kind of pour the extra small stuff or the small stuff all over the LPS corals, the NPS corals. And
that's got to be tricky though.
Not well, you turn off all the flow. Any flow is going to make them move, but these are ones that won't open, right? And so I kind of cover them where the polyps are, and then in about half an hour they would open.
Wow.
And then I would feed them. So I want to do that more. I think in my quest for flow, I may not have a good low flow time in the tank. Huh. And you know, at least once or twice a week, I want to turn the flow off and then power feed the NPS, the non-photosynthetic corals, with a food, whether it be a pellet food like the TDO or whether it be a frozen food. So while all that was happening, I also I put a fish trap in and I caught out the big fox face that I had because he's now nibbling at stuff. So the closed dendros, I think he's been nibbling at and helping keep them closed.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. He's definitely nibbling at stuff. And there's also, I'll get to this in a sec. We won't take too long on this, but there's been a shift in my tank since I did the OA treatment. The oxalinic acid, which was a treatment to help with the RTN. And it seems like it helped with the RTN, but it also seems like it did a couple other things. It resolved Popeye in a damsel that I have that's had.
Wait.
Yeah.
Is that correlation causation?
It is, but it's pretty damn direct. Popeye for 4 to 6 months off and on, mostly on. Dose with this antibiotic, Popeye goes away. It's
So at least
pretty.
it's a data point. It's not like you would hang your hat on that.
Yeah. But I'm pretty hat hanging on that. That's a pretty strong correlation.
I'm skeptical, not cynical, but skeptical.
You should be. Everyone else should be. For me, that correlation is pretty strong. It's not always that correlation doesn't imply causation. Sometimes it does.
It's just a cautionary tale.
Absolutely. And you're right to say it. And some of my NPS and LPS look better. 3 or 4 years ago, I had a problem with my NPS and LPS. I had some pathogen coming through and releasing them from their skeleton. And that mausolea that you were there when I bought, and then you came and you're like, oh, it's not looking good. I'm like, yeah, I know. That fluorescent green is coming back. I'll get you a picture next time so you can see it. It looks really interesting, modeled with really bright patches. Again, that's correlation. But I feel pretty strongly that the dosing of the OA, the changes happened right in line with that. So I caught that fish out. We can do a whole thing about fish catching. I said, I'm going to get this fish in 4 days, and I got him in 3. I got a new way of getting them into the trap faster.
He's a magnificent, correct?
No, he's a regular.
Okay.
Remember, like 3 or 4 years ago, the magnificent and this one they were great together for like 3 or 4 years, and then they just fought, and the magnificent lost that one, and it was so fast and so brutal, I couldn't do anything about it.
Wow.
So I pulled that fish out, and then I rearranged the tank again, and it's looking good. Everything's looking good. Things look like they're growing again. There is some algae issues in the tank. So clearly I've lost herbivores in that tank, and I didn't quite see it happening. And even everywhere. Although in the tank behind me on this side, what side am I pointing to? The left or right?
Your left, my right.
That tank has got a mantis in it that eats all the snails. There's huge algae going on in that tank because I think
on
the
purpose.
Mantis, well, yeah, it's a peacocks. I want to catch them out. It's just I would rather have a non-algae tank than have a mantis because he eats the snails, and then I'm pretty sure he ate the tang that was in there. And I never see him in there. So if I'm going to keep him, I got to put him somewhere where I can see him. But I did add, and John from Bay Area Reefers will love this, I added some Mexican turbo snails. Is that what they are? No, Mexican.
Trocus?
What are they? No, the big rounder ones.
Zebra trocus?
No.
Man, I swear those are trocus.
Man, my brains are not working.
Not
right.
abalone.
No, it's the Mexican. I'll have to look. God, I'm so sorry.
Oh, radio.
It's the one I always talk about that, when they were saying that if they don't eat your algae, they're from the wrong part of Mexico. Mexican, maybe they're Mexican turbo snails. Oh, I can't believe I'm spacing on this. Fuck
Estrella?
me. And no. You're probably right, and I'm just being an idiot. And
I get these Mexican zebra trocus all the time, and they end up these monstrous suckers. So that's
no, they're not zebras. They're. I should look at my own talk. Anyway, I bought a bunch of those, and in the talk I talk about how sometimes they do mow down algae and sometimes they don't. Well, I got some new ones, and they freaking mowed the crap out of the algae. They like huge, fluffy. They just ate it all. So that's great. And then the last thing that's going on with all this flow stuff, I've been talking about changing out my return pumps forever anyway to Ciches, to DCs. They're now Fluval SB6s, taking about 115 watts. The Fluval, the Ciche is supposed to be less than that. And I probably won't be using it full. While I was looking at my flow, I looked at the closed loop and what it does by itself. And I think I had some areas too much, and it was just pounding some areas. And so I've calmed that down, and I realized, even if this Ciche is a little bit less flow, which it may not be, I don't need to run it 100%. And the ability for me to take my return down to 5% rather than turning it off will make my life so much better when I'm working in the tank, because the water level won't drop. You know how it and things are exposed.
So I believe you're talking about then a Seache SDC model. Is the DC controllable. They also have a DC non-controllable, and I think it's called an ADC.
It's got to go through Apex, and I'm feeling like it's time, and I'm okay with that now.
The only thing I'm scared about that, Richard, is because that fluval has been insanely
awesome,
tough. Just it's just going and going. You just can't control it.
And I got a brand new one in box. It's great. It's been fantastic. Here's my big problem with this pump right now, and I've already yelled at Steve Berlin, but for whatever reason, the threaded connection on both sides without this adapter is 1 3/8.
Oh.
Which is a weird proprietary thing. I think the Vectras do this too, and I think the cores do this. They have a weird size threading. So for most people, that's not going to be a problem at all, right? And for me, it's a problem. For most people, you put the 1-inch adapter on, slipper thread, put it on, drop it on the floor and break it, go to town.
Yeah.
And there's no O-ring here. Oh, okay, there's a line there. It goes through. Okay, so for most people, it won't matter. You're doing your plumbing. You'll put this on. You're fine. For me, the way my pumps are put in, they're external. It needs to be this. It's almost exactly this right size. So one adapter here and one adapter here to get these to be 1.5 inches, and I don't have to change any plumbing. If I have to put anything else besides that one bushing adapter, I have to change all the plumbing under the house.
Ugh.
And either, I mean, the easy ways to do it would be to but see, here's the thing. I want to leave it so the fluval, I can put it back in if there's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So either, so what I'm probably going to have to do, if I can't 3D print a part to fit.
That scares me.
And that's what people are saying, but look how thin this is.
Yeah,
I'm kind of going.
No offense to Seache, but I was a little scared of. I usually, when I do install those, I install those internal still, because the thinness of the unions scared me a little bit.
Yeah. So I mean, if that's okay, it's probably okay to 3D print. But I've been talking to some 3D people about that, and we're all a little sketch about it. So either, no, this is probably how it has to be done. Well, either I take the fluval out, and in between where that goes, I put an elbow with 2 unions. Because, right, I can't leave the fluval in place and pump through it, right? Yeah. I can't even take the impeller out and pump through it. That would just be stupid. Yeah. So I think what I'm going to have to do is drop this pump in the sump, and where the discharge from the fluval now goes into the plumbing, I'll put a half union there, because it's a true union right there, with a barb fitting, and I'll run a 1-inch silicone tube from the pump up into the thing, up into the rest of the plumbing. That is inelegant and seems horrible, but it's actually probably the easiest way to test to see if the pump's actually going to give me the flow that I need it to give me.
God, and I should probably fly out there for that.
So maybe, but boy, because then we'd take out all the flow monitoring and, anyway, don't fly out till I test it. If we're going to do some really snippy, changey, well, you should come out for that, because that would be fun.
Yeah.
But man, it is so frustrating to go, wow, just for one fitting that doesn't exist, I would be able to hot swap this and hot swap the fluval back and forth and be not a total non-issue. But I can't do it unless I can find a 1 3/8 female bushing with the male part on the outside of the bushing 1.5.
Yeah, that'd be super weird. I mean, you could skim the internet, see if it is, but
I skim the internet. And
you went down a rabbit hole.
Oh, I've even got the bushing right here. So here, right? What's happening? This is a longer. I was so excited. This is a longer section than I thought. I was so excited because I found that you can cut me off. We cut everything else that I was supposed to talk about. I found that I had 2 of these laying around, and I was like, sweet. I just throw these on the pump, right? 1.5 inch goes into the union. Great. 1.25 inches on the inside goes onto the pump. Great. And I sat here for like 5 minutes going, why won't this go on?
It's like super, super close.
It's
enough to make you think maybe good to do it.
Yeah, and look, I'm doing it again right now. I'm going, boy, that should work.
And it starts to sort of work, but then not.
It won't even thread. Yeah. That's when I went and checked and went, oh, it's 1 3/8. Although it feels like it's bigger.
Come on, CJ.
I don't know. All these pumps have some reason for doing it. I can't really be upset at them. This is a weird situation. Most of the time, you would just throw this on. It would be no big deal. I guess what I could do is leave this external and go barb fitting, whip around to the return, and a barb fitting, whip around to another barb fitting on the intake.
Silicone tubing?
Yeah, always silicone tubing. I got to get some 1-inch silicone tubing now. But
and then my experience on the putting silicone tubing on the intake side, if you do that, first of all, consider thick wall tubing. And then on top of that, don't make that run very long because it can have a tendency to collapse under negative pressure.
Yeah, I don't think I will do that. I think it just makes more sense to drop it in. Then life's a little bit easier. And I'm definitely not in a rush. Now that we've been bashing the idea of the CJ, I plugged in the CJ and I hooked it up to the Apex in about 12 seconds. And it was perfect, and it's exciting. I'm excited to use it. We just have to figure out this plumbing.
Boom, 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 boom. Richard, saltwateraquarium.com, the longtime sponsor of this show, is so absolutely huge, so absolutely awesome. There's a lot of reasons, and we say those reasons all the time. One thing I want to get out front, though, is when you go to saltwateraquarium.com and order stuff, seriously use our URL that we have down below, because otherwise they can't quantify, where they've come from. And we want them to know that Reef Beef people's coming from them.
Yeah. And, or put something ridiculous in the notes there. You should do that with any of our sponsors. If you talk to them directly, you should put some ridiculous thing in their notes. But SWA is like a big company, that's small enough to be awesome, right? So they're big enough to have 3 different distribution centers across the states, so that when you order from them, they show up pretty quickly at your house, no matter what. And they've got a huge selection of stuff. Plus, they've got some livestock. They've got cleanup crews now. They're kind of great, and they're really fun to hang out with at shows.
And in the show, we were talking about CJ pumps. If you want a CJ pump, go look on saltwateraquarium.com.
Yeah, I like CJ pumps as well. Saltwateraquarium.com. You can test them questions and they'll answer you. They've got an app. If you're addicted to your phone, you can buy stuff on your phone from the toilet or from the bed or for wherever you are.
And when you order from them, in the order notes, if you can write what I like to refer to as a poem, you can write a poem and put that in there and make it a poem about reef beef and saltwater aquarium stuff. But thank you, saltwateraquarium.com. We surely appreciate it.
Righteous.
Boom, 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 boom. That's enough out of you.
I'm shutting up now.
So my little deal was, I would say about
what I was going to say.
No, About I think about 4 months ago, I have this reef tank that I installed. It has a cool arch that I built out of live rock and Marco Rock E400 cement, and was real pretty aquarium. And I had some hiccups with the ATO. They contacted me late at evening one time and said that there was water on the floor, which is not super fun because it's like 40 minutes away, but you know, you jump. And so I ran out there, water on the floor. The ATO was looking weird, and I checked everything. And I thought I sort of troubleshot it, but there was no real big smoking gun. And I thought I got it. You know, everything was seeming to work for a while. So then the next night they called me out again and said, sorry, water on the floor again. So I checked even harder. And what the deal was, it's a vast marine top, and then if you're familiar with those, it has a nipple and then like a John Guest fitting, and then John Guest like 1/4 inch line that goes to a little barrel that sits in the sump. Well, what I found is that wasn't quite pressed in all the way. So it wasn't gaining all the pressure that it needed to shut off. So it was so stupid, so innocuous. Yet, you know, and I'd ran in there and I put all the water back. I checked the salinity. I, you know, put the salinity back. But doing these, it's so amazing. These giant roller coasters of salinity that can happen. Boy, I'm telling you, that can derail a tank worse than most people think it can. I don't know if it fucks with bacteria, if it just fucks with the whole ecosystem. So just those 2 little episodes over the course of 2 days, and it seemed like everything was hunky-dory for like a week. But then in this tank, I visit every other week. So then I come by 2 weeks later, boom, freaking hair algae everywhere. I'm like, oh shit. So then this is where this morphs away from, you know, talking about the science of an aquarium to the science of doing business. So, you know, I go in there, it's a hair algae mess in this, you know, so it's an old folks home. So this old lady, you know, and the people there love this tank. This old lady goes up in a wheelchair, and, you know, in business, when you're out there cleaning aquariums, you always have to remember, like, no matter how frustrated you are, like, you have to stop when people are talking to you, and your frustration about the aquarium cannot translate in how you talk to people. And I'm really good at that just because I've been doing it for so long, but you have to check yourself. This lady rolls up and she goes, oh, it looks like crap. And I'm like biting my lip, and I'm like, yes, ma'am. And she goes, what's all that dark stuff? And I'm like, yes, ma'am, that's algae because it, you know, had a little, you know. And so whether you want to say boohoo on Ben or not, like I tried to be like, okay, let's out maintenance this. So I did this big water change, and I come back. What I should have done is come back the next week. And it doesn't matter that I'm just charging them every other week. The tank got way off the tracks, and it's a corporate account. So in order to, so, you know, the admin doesn't start questioning me, you got to fix it fast, whether you're being paid for it or not. If you don't like to swallow that pill, you're going to have a hard time doing this as a business. Sure, I could have talked to admin, say, hey, I need to do this extra work. I need to get paid for it. Maybe. But then it was a malfunction of equipment. If you want those monthly checks rolling in, maybe you also gamble and say, hey, I come a little extra, I fix this shit, and then we go. Long story short, this takes like a couple months. And every time I show up, I'm like, shit, man, I'm going to get fired unless I get ahead of this thing. So I have those Marineland polishing filters that you and I talk about a lot.
Yeah.
I have 3 of them now. So I ran 3 of them at a time. I pinched off all the algae, did a 44-gallon brute container water change. And lo and behold, I come back the next week, I broke the algae's back, thankfully. But it's funny, you know, this all happens in stages. It morphed from the ugly green hair algae to slimy, bubbly, I guess, dinoflagellates. And I was like, you know, you could be like, crap, but I was like, okay, well, I moved it off of the hair algae. You know, and the strange thing too is this whole time, the corals are doing gloriously. They're just sharing their space with some ugliness. You know, and all these other times I'm showing up, by God, this same old lady rolls up. Tanks look like shit. Thank you, lady. Thank you. You know, I didn't have a hint of sarcasm, but I was like, yes, ma'am, you know, it's because blah, blah, blah. You know, like, can you wheel away from here, please? But
You know,
I finally got it going, but it's like I stretched it out to, you know, it looked like crap for 2 to 3 months. And that was very dangerous on my side for probably the admin getting, you know, a hold of me. Go ahead, Richard.
it's hard, man, because the things go in flux. You know, a reef tank. This is why we say correlation and causation is so weird, because, you know, it's like steering an iceberg. You kind of push it in the direction you want to go, and if you screw it up, you may not know for months. You know,
Man, Richard, that occurred in my head too, the steering the iceberg thing, because, you know, sometimes it was the workers too. What's going on with the aquarium? And I got a little hint from all these people that they just, you know, first of all, it's like, why do you think I fucking come here all the time? Because this thing is not easy to take care of. And they're like, why does it look so ugly? Yeah, because I'm fucking lazy. No, because this shit is just not that easy to steer back.
yeah.
You know, and I tried my best to explain that, and then they, you know, wheel off or walk away. But I was like, just let me do my job. I'm freaking out.
I got 2 questions for you, and I'm sorry you were freaking out. The first one is how to take care of that old lady. You just wear bicycle shorts when you're working and be on your hands and knees as much as possible and let her wheel up and just take you in.
Yes. Perfect height.
That's probably, she'd be like, oh, that tank looks like shit, boy. Did you notice anything with coralline algae in that tank? Did you see a retreat of coralline?
All right, this is going to make you nuts, because this is one of those aquariums that I put the double helix, whatever the pink and the purple coralline algae accelerator in, and it has an explosive amount of coralline. You know how coralline is, where sometimes it's doing bad, but it's still purple, and you can't really tell, like, is it? So I couldn't tell, like, you know, okay. and now I see new coralline, you know, it's trudging forward, but it was hard to tell whether the ugly algae was affecting the coralline algae.
Okay. Because I know in my system, I took a coralline hit, and, you know, that could be from anything. It started happening around the same time that the RTN was happening. And it could be that, you know, I've had some lower alkalinity for a while. I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. Why the pump doesn't, why the calcium reactor isn't keeping up in the same way. So it'll go down to like 7.5 for a day or two. And then it'll be up to 8.7 where it's supposed to be. And then I guess when I'm adding water, it drops it again, but it used to pop up faster. So maybe I just need to dial in the camera a little bit more and get more flow going through. It's weird. But I'm definitely seeing more algae, more problem algae. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to pull that fox face as well. Cause see, we brought it back to my tank again. I'm not done. Cause I think he's too big.
Gonna hate that.
He's continuity. Continuity. He's too big to get at the algae in some places. Maybe.
Oh,
maybe
his size makes him an ineffective herbivore.
Yeah. So I've replaced him with a little herbivore, and we'll see what happens.
Boom, 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 boom. Hey, Champion Lighting and Supply. I got something recent from them. Look at this here. This thing is from Poland. It's called a Reef Flare Pro M Blue. This LED light is from Reef Factory. So I'm going to put this above that the bare bottom cube tank that I've been talking about in my house. This is going to be my main light. I got an armature for it as well. Pretty cool. Is
Champion the only place to get Reef Factory stuff?
You know, I can't say that. I don't know that for certain. They were for a while, but I think maybe this company's been pushing out to other places. But certainly Champion is one of the places to get it from.
I know they've got a lot of their stuff, which is pretty cool. Yeah. I can't wait to see what you think about that, because I totally and absolutely am interested in the Reef Factory stuff.
So thank you, Champion Lighting and Supply, for all the support and sponsorship, and go check them out. Boom, 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 boom. Richard, there's skepticism and then there's cynicism. And I know that you, as someone who has a philosophy degree, that is very solidly in your wheelhouse. And I just wanted to take a stab before I had you launch into it, because that's very applicable to when we think about reef tanks, being skeptical or cynical about stuff. So I wanted to take a stab at the difference between skepticism and cynicism. So
okay.
Cynicism would be like a negative attitude and not giving anything the time of day to think critically about it, just because you're being overly negative. No, that doesn't work. No, that's not going to work. No, I'm not going to talk to them. Where it feels to me like skepticism is more like just questioning everything, yet, maybe doing a little shallow or even deep dive. You're just skeptical. You'll just stop on a data point and say, hey, let me look into that. Not just outright dismissing it like a cynic would.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's really easy to flow from being skeptical into cynicism. And it's very easy for people to interpret you being skeptical as being cynical. And I think that's because people really want their idea to be right. And so when you question their idea, they're like, fuck you, this is a good idea. It's like, well, let's walk through it. And then you see it's a mind story, not a good idea. So that's tough. That's a tough one. And in the skeptical reef keeping articles, there were always a disclaimer about what this was and what this isn't. And, sometimes on skeptical discussions and even on the Discord, and, I call it squinting now on the public Discord, it's called squinting because I think that's really what we're doing. We're not going, no, we're going, help me believe you. Mm-hmm. People who are not watching the video, I'm squinting.
Yeah.
And sometimes what happens is in discussions like that, and even on the Discord, I see it sometimes, even in the skeptical channel in the members area, people get, and understandably so, they get a glee when they're chasing down an idea that doesn't seem to be working, or they're discussing an idea that somebody is presenting but doesn't have any support, or actually has support the other way, and you go, that's just wrong. There's a natural feeling of excitement about that. And then everyone gets on the same page and it kind of starts rolling, and it's really easy for that to get to be able to be interpreted as, that's just an old boys club hating everything. And it's really hard. It's really hard to not do that, because and it's weird because you get it, right? When you finally find somebody who agrees with you, that you go, oh, this idea doesn't make sense to me, and then they go, yeah, and then there's all this excitement around the joy of figuring it out. It's not the joy of fuck you, your idea is stupid. It's the idea of, oh, look, I knew there was something wrong here, and now we're kind of figured out what I think is wrong.
See, and I'm not necessarily trying to make this about me in this little part, but I find that I largely avoid all that mess, and I know that. So I was trying to think, like, why do I feel like I avoid all that mess? And whether this is helpful to anyone or not, I guess the thing that I do is I'm fully aware that I'm ignorant of a lot of things, and I'm totally okay with that. It does not bother me. There's no way that I could know that much about that many things. So I don't ever get that feeling like I'm going to be mad if my idea isn't right. I'm also a very curious person. So the way I approach stuff is I sort of feel like most of the time I'm just trying to learn. I'm not trying to have people say, Ben, you're right. I'm just trying to learn shit. And sometimes that comes off as me looking or sounding like a dumbass to some things, which sometimes I am a dumbass about things, but I assure you, I'm just here trying to learn. I'm not trying to get more check marks on my name for being right all the time. So, again, maybe it's different personalities, but
it's also, it depends on where the conversation is happening. In a channel squinting or called skeptical channel, you should expect skeptical discussion, right? I mean, and you know, out in the public, not in one of those channels, being overly skeptical puts people, they get grumpy because they think they're not used to thinking that way. It's just like you, and I learned this again recently, that you're just an asshole. No, that, you know, you always say, just be blunt with me.
Yeah.
Because my brain is stupid and needs you to be blunt. That's what you said to me the other day. And it was like, you're right. And getting, you know, as I forget that, it's like, I can't just be blunt because then I'm just being a dick. And it's like, no, that's how Ben wants me to talk.
I'm a weirdo because as long as I know that we're friends, I want you to be blunt to the point of being dick, because sometimes I don't, sometimes I feel witty, but sometimes I don't catch the nuance of something you're telling me. And
so people who are not accustomed to that, or not accustomed to talking in a skeptical way or thinking in a skeptical way, often can interpret either of those discussions as being an asshole.
Yeah, and if you don't know someone well and you're in a heated discussion and they're like, "Oh, they just attacked me." Well, in the other person's head, they might be thinking, "Well, I'm attacking this idea." And it's like, dude, I'm not attacking you. You seem like a fine person. You just have this one weird thing that I'm.
Whoops. But that, oh, look, I'm Superman.
A beauty curve.
I have a tentacle fell down in front of my face.
Yeah.
That looks like Superman's hair. Yeah. So people don't know that, right? People don't know the difference between, they're not used to communicating in that way. And, you know, I always say it's, you know, respect the people, disrespect ideas. So that's a little dangerous because not everyone understands that, right? So even if you're very good at it, people will still take you as attacking them, not their ideas. But the better you get at it, at really separating, it's a real skill to be able to write, you know, I don't, in a way for somebody not used to talking philosophically, how to write, you know, I think your idea is bullshit and this is why. But even saying, hey, I don't agree with your idea, not you, with this idea, and this is why, and then just listing it, you got a better chance of them hearing you.
What's rational?
You can't just do it. You can't, you know, people, especially online, you know, it's very hard to develop a culture where all of this is acceptable all the time. I mean, we had a little bit of somebody getting, you know, being unhappy in the skeptical channel in the members area. And I totally understand that, because sometimes it does turn into, you know, well, this video came out and it's just dumb. And it's like, that's shorthand. And if you're not used to the shorthand, that looks really shitty.
Yeah.
But it's not meant really shitty. It shouldn't be meant really shitty, or it may just be that excitement again. So I'm looking at a couple of ways, just as we're talking about this, as a couple of ways to extend, to make the Reef Beef community more betterer. And I'm thinking of having an area. I'm not sure if it's going to be a forum or an area on the Discord. I think it might be a forum, but it's like, this is what a forum is for. There is no off-topic discussion here.
Yeah,
you know,
not at all.
There, you know, no, it stays on topic. That's what it's for. The Discord, do whatever the hell you want.
Party time.
But on the forum, we're going to use this as a, pretend like it's a professional conversation.
So Richard, though, how can, I want you to tie in the skepticism versus cynicism. And there's this thing that has cropped up with the metal halides letting out UV, and is UV important? Like, can you tie that into those together?
Yeah. If it wasn't being discussed more, like when it first happened, I just went, oh, they say they're going to do they're going to get some information by doing some tests or experiments. There's really nothing to talk about until that, because it's all just mind stories. But people are, but it's got traction. So it's difficult to know what to do with it. We could walk through the claims, and I could tell you what the skeptic in me would say about the claims, but we'd have to walk through the claims. I think we have a Discord question at Ask Reef Beef about that, actually.
Boom, 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 boom. PolypLab is also a sponsor, but we like to say that we are powered by PolypLab.
And this week, talking about what's powering Rich's tank from PolypLab is the coral glue.
Oh yeah, baby.
The gluelets. I have run out of all glue besides PolypLab glue, and it's working pretty great. The tubes are just the right size, either for a couple frags or for placing something big in the tank. So these have been really helpful, and I'm glad I've got them around. It's a glue. It's got a longer working time than another glue, but that's not a big deal. Just something to know. And for most people, that's probably a good thing. So when I say longer working time, I hold it for a minute instead of 40 seconds. It's not that big a deal. And I like that you can buy them in a package with a few of them in there, or you can buy it with a package. You can buy the grenade bomb that's got a lot more of them in there. They've got a bunch of other products as well, but that's the one we're highlighting today. Powered by PolypLab, Reef Beef. PolypLab has powered us.
Boom, 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 boom.
I submit this question to be answered on the show. Do you believe the traction occurring related to going back to halides for UV is justified? If so, explain what evidence you know of that can lead in that direction. If not, why do you feel the testing and discussions occurring regularly in other hobbyist influence platform is being out correctly, or what could be done better? Okay. This is kind of, I think, what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, the discussion of the UV and metal halide rings all my skeptical bells, because nobody's really provided anything but mine stories. Now, again, people are going to take mine story, just me calling it a mine story, as a negative, and it's not. It's not a negative. It's and we all do mine stories all the time. It's like calling it anecdote. Look, you see me, as you've known me for a while, I change phraseology from time to time because I'm trying a new way to not be taken as an asshole when I'm asking questions. And it's really hard. So, so I want to know. So it rings all my skeptical bells. And why does it ring my skeptical bells? Well, we did a lot of work with UV in the past. All right, UV was a thing in the early 2005s. And lots of people, maybe before, lots of people tried different UV solutions, caused lots of problems, killed shit. And metal halide bulbs need to have a UV filter. Otherwise, you can get hurt, right? Whether that's in the envelope or on the bulb itself, or you put something in between, right? The DE bulbs, I remember using, it was always like you needed to have a glass in between that would attenuate the UV. So there's a lot's already been done, and nothing's really popped up as useful. And we know about UV in the water and how it attenuates very quickly sometimes in the first meter. I think the study, one of the studies. So people who are on about the UV presented here's a book about UV. And it's like, well, in that book, here's a paper about UV, and here's some papers. It's like, well, in this paper about UV, it shows that in the best conditions at about 5 meters, there's about 1% UVB, which is what people are talking about now, UVB.
5 meters or 3 meters?
It was 5 meters.
So 15 feet.
Yes. 1% at 15 feet. So I don't remember what the curve was. So I don't remember what it was lower, right? But it's not 100% at 10 feet. I don't know what it is at 2 feet. And in the worst conditions, where they tested, where it was the water was more cloudy, more turbid. It was 1% at 1 meter.
Oh, wow. So if UV is important, I mean, if UV is doing something beneficial for a coral, it's not exactly even making it.
That's what the information we currently have seems to show. Some people are showing different versions of that, but it was like, well, here's a bunch of peer-reviewed stuff that shows that it doesn't get down there really. So that makes me squint, because it's like, well, there is a lot of information about UV penetration in saltwater and in the ocean, and it feels like that hasn't been looked at enough for me to then go spend my time dig deep into it. It's like it's like a potluck. Maybe skepticism is like a potluck. You know, if I'm going to make a big dessert to bring to the potluck, and all you brought is, you know, a cookie, right? Does this analogy make any sense?
Yeah, no, like you brought ambrosia and someone brought just a single chocolate chip cookie from Starbucks.
Yeah. And they were like, oh, here, and I'm going to eat all your food. It's kind of like, it's like, you got to do your diligence if you really want people to pay attention. Now, well, that's also totally not true, right? Most people aren't looking that deep, and they just go, oh, somebody I respect said that UV is probably a thing or might be a thing. Okay, that's how most of the world works, and that makes complete sense. But I don't feel like they're bringing much what I call compelling evidence to the table for it. Right.
Well, and so by talking about this on Reef Beef, this is what I want the listener or the viewer to get out of this is anytime, so that, you know, this is an industry where things crop up on, you know, if you're watching other podcasts and someone makes a statement, even popular people, and then you start hearing it all over the place. Oh, they said this, that, this. Just be skeptical. No need to be cynical, but be skeptical of everything. What I wouldn't want someone to do is, oh, so-and-so said that UV is important, so now UV is important. Be a little skeptical and look into it.
Yeah, and that, I think, is why skepticality is important. Critical thinking is important, because then you look at the claim, and I'm not sure anybody's really saying. They might be, but I'm going to be as super generous. I don't think anybody's really saying, hey, UVB is the answer for all kinds of stuff. I think they're saying, I think it may be the answer.
But people are making equipment.
Are they?
I've seen it. I don't know the name of the companies, but there's people making like bars of like that only sort of put out UV.
That's a reptile thing.
Okay.
That's a reptile thing. So there is a market for it where it makes sense. Now, part of the other in the narrative of the UVB that makes me go, what? There's two other pieces. One is that UVB has germicidal properties. That's true. It does, but not going through water.
Yeah.
Water is a really, really good light UV filter.
Yeah.
And I think saltwater is even better, right? The other part that makes me go, that makes me squint. Sorry. Go, seems worse than saying that makes me squint. I mean it the same way. Is that the argument that, well, we absorb vitamin D through our skin, and that comes from the sunlight, or you know, the reptiles need to have vitamin D through their skin. They need the UV. Underwater. They need their UV, right? But those animals don't live in saltwater and never come out. So that's. I tried to come up with a. You know, that's like going, well, you know, we breathe air, so fish will do better if they're in air. And that's a terrible analogy, number one, but it gets the feeling across. And the analogy also feels like a dick thing to say. And it's not. It's all analogies are for is to try to get the other person to see your perspective from a different angle that might let them understand better what you're saying.
For whatever reason, sometimes people can get a mind block. Maybe they're even mad because they think you're being cynical instead of skeptical.
Yeah.
And they sort of get stuck. So if you reposition the argument in a different way, they might, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I want you to see it from what I'm seeing. And so often the extreme argument the extreme example is needed to really make that point home. But often the extreme is absurd. And so it feels like an attack. But if you don't do the extreme one, it doesn't have the same effect. It's just like, oh, well, that doesn't make any sense. It's like, I know it doesn't make any sense. I'm trying to hammer this so you see the different thing. There was one other thing in the kind of UV discussions. Oh, then they talk about spectrum and that, they say that metal halide has, a full spectrum. Doesn't. The sun has, what is full spectrum? Here we get right into like bedrock skepticality. I don't know what we're talking about when people say full spectrum, because full spectrum is a marketing term for metal halides. And and marketing terms are marketing terms. So metal halides don't really approximate the sun at all. A halide plot is thicker than and wider than most LED plots. Okay. But if you compare that plot to sunlight, there's a whole lot of stuff that metal halides are not picking up, right? That are not producing. So if we're going to say UV is important, then the rest of the stuff in the spectrum also needs, the arguments seem to be that to seem to hold for the other stuff that metal halides don't have. The most approximate that I've seen was the rice bulbs, the little plasma bulbs, and those fried corals.
Yeah,
so because it was like the spectrum, and if you put your stuff under the sun, you're gonna have a bad time till they acclimate, whatever that means. So that there's all my skepticality about. I think I've covered all of it. Let me see. Halides or UV, I don't know if they're justified or not. No one's presented any evidence that compels me. Also, corals produce compounds to protect themselves from UV. The corals that got exposed at low tide, those produce a lot of mucus and a lot of compounds as a sunscreen. So, is it good? I don't know if the corals are protecting themselves from it. Does it have germicidal properties or anti-parasitic properties or anti-pest properties that the juice is worth the squeeze for the corals to have to produce all of that mucus? Maybe. But of course, maybe that mucus is what's having the germicidal and anti-parasitic and anti-pest properties.
But also chemotherapy is good at killing cancer, but it's also good at fucking you up too.
That's quite true. And we have example after example of example after example after example after example of baller coral tanks with no UV and no halides.
Yeah.
Right? We had corals that spawn and babies that grow without it. We see just as much, anecdotally, just as much RTN and STN with metal halides as we see without metal halides. So do people, so what are people on the farm seeing? There's a couple of farms that are seeing it. I don't want to name any names because I don't want it mixed up. I love all these people. I like talking to all these people. They're seeing an effect. I don't discount their effect, but before I can jump on the bandwagon, I just need more. It's, we've seen too many things come around like this.
Yeah.
And I think I said, metal halide is and some people are trying to press, Jake Adams into saying, metal halide's the best. And somebody shared a video of Jake saying, no, metal halide is the best. And it's like, he says that, but you have to look at the rest of the 4-minute clip where he says, all things being equal, yeah, metal halides, I like metal halide the best, but all things are not equal.
Yeah.
And then he talks about why he's not using halides.
Yeah.
So, it isn't just one thing. And also, I'm pretty sure we're going to see halides just go away. There's just,
totally.
They're being phased out. They got mercury in them. They're just not, they're not a great thing, and people don't dispose of them properly. And why are we doing this extra work? And
I've heard that T5 is headed in that direction as well.
I would expect all of these, given LEDs, unless we find something terrible about LEDs, like they're causing, people to
turn green.
I expect all of them to go away because LEDs are just kind of better for the environment.
Boom, 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 boom.
Hey, Beefers, thank you for your support. We sure appreciate all the ways you support us, from being members or for buying us coffees or for sharing, liking, and subscribing. Want to remind you, if you're a member, you've got a line to Ask Reef Beef. You can directly ask us questions, and we will likely answer them on the show. We like that. While we like to babble about skepticality for 17 hours on the show, we also like to hear what you guys want us to talk about, you all. So let us know. Thank you very much for all the support. We sure appreciate it. We wouldn't be doing this show without you. So we dig it. We'll see you where we see you.
Boom, 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 boom.
So is it justified? I don't see any justification for it. I'd love to see compelling evidence. I haven't seen any yet. No one's given it to me yet. All the evidence that we've looked at so far, except for some of the anecdotes, seem to say not what people are saying about it. Meh. I haven't looked at carefully because of our potluck kind of thing.
Yeah. Reef Beef isn't asking you to be a cynical asshole. Reef Beef is asking you to be a skeptical, critical thinker. And because you watch a video and you're like, oh, the guy said blah, blah, blah.
So I think that's good. And the last question that Jim asked in the Ask Reef Beef, what do you think is occurring that's not being carried out or could be done better? And putting the cart before the horse. This is why, when researchers are working on something, they often don't talk about it in any kind of public way because they don't want people to get the wrong idea, because they haven't done the testing or experiments yet to be able to say if it's true. It is literally a mind story. And the reason why you do not just the peer review process, but the process of putting together an experiment robustly and scientifically is so you can say that here I started with a mind story, as everything does. And look, my mind story holds up with all of this work that I did to see if the mind story made any sense. Or here's a lot of research. I don't even have to do any testing because all this research I found really compellingly supports my thesis, my idea, my hypothesis, my mind story. It's all the same thing, right? And until you do that, we run into some problem, with spawning and settlement, and there was one study that shows that they like to settle on red things, but that doesn't seem to be repeatable. So,
it's got to be repeatable. It's got to be robust.
And it's also, I've got to be able, before I'm going to come out and say, so my algae talk, which is all herbivores, and every day now I'm seeing more evidence that makes me feel like that argument is correct, that herbivores are the key, that nutritional levels in your tank aren't really so great.
I do too,
for fighting algae.
I do too.
Thanks. But that talk took me 2 years to put together. And I would be very sneaky in the way that I would ask questions. I would go on forums or in discussions. I would say, oh, great. What, have you ever seen direct evidence of the only thing you change is the nitrate and the phosphate levels, and then you get a remission in algae? And there's one or two of those. but the rest of it, it's not there. So, but I didn't go out and I didn't go, you guys are full of crap. It's herbivores. I took a lot of time and built a case and then presented the case. I feel like in some of these discussions, it's just anecdote, mind stories, however you want to call it, hypotheses being put out there without any caveats about, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And we got in an interesting discussion about this, about getting information from interview shows. Usually you go on interview shows after you've written something up, right? Jamie Craggs, when he did the coral spawning stuff, he didn't go out and start going, look at what I'm planning on spawning corals and this is what I'm doing. And, this is going to be great. He talked to some people in a circle and built his circle out to get some input from people, right? But he didn't go, hey, guess what I'm doing? This is going to be awesome. He waited and then he was able to publish and go, this is what I did. And it was awesome. And if you have questions about it, because we're not going to get into the details here, because this is an interview, I've written it up in a paper or an article for you to see. And that's kind of the way to present these things in a way, because then you can go and see their argument. If I'm taking a snippet of somebody's interview from one show and that they did 2 years ago about some process that they're doing, and then a snippet from what they've just done 6 months ago and a snippet from what they did just now, I don't really have a comprehensive picture of what they're doing, because they're probably not doing exactly the same thing they were doing 2 years ago. So we're just kind of we're hoping we remember what they said accurately. We hope that they actually believed it and it wasn't just some off the cuff thing, but we have no way to know that because there's no source material. There's just talking.
This is what can get frustrating when you're, if you're like reading popular scientific articles, because there's a scientific journalist that wants, and some are, it's just like all things, some are great and some are not so great. And they, they want to either write online or in a magazine because they want people to consume or click or on this cool, cancer treatment found, blah, blah, blah. And you read it and then you would talk to some scientists in the know and it's like, man, that was misconstrued. That's not what we said. That, like popular journalism or whatnot, or clickbait versus actual scientific evidence. And again, that's why I stick back to skepticism, because again, in a nutshell, if you go on the internet and you're like, oh, I see these things, they said these things, and these things are true, you're going to have a bad time in life.
Yeah.
You just need to be more skeptical.
Yeah. Now, if I was primary author on a new paper, I would write a non-science version of the paper. Mm-hmm. I would publish the paper and then I would write a civilian version of the paper. I kind of threatened to do that with the LPSO, with the octopus paper, but not too many people care about actually what we talked about there. But I might do that. There might be another project that would make me do that. But if I was doing a new paper, I would do it in as plain English as possible. The algae talk I did is in as plain English as possible. But if there isn't even a scientific jargon-filled paper supporting the idea, and there's no hobby article about it, we don't really know what's going on. And I think the people working on the OA treatment are being smart, and it's out there. You can find people who are going to do it, but they're not talking because it's not published yet. And I think that's correct.
Yeah, wait till you have your ducks in a row.
Yeah, and if you're in the know, it's not so hard to be able to find out what people did. But should you do it yourself is a whole nother question. And it's tough. So, I get that they're waiting on it, and I think when that comes out, they will also follow it up with hobby versions of the information in it. And I think that's good. When Dustin Dorton did the red bug treatment with Interceptor, he didn't come out and go, oh, well, I saw that the active ingredient in Interceptor does something at this level of of activity that I think would hurt red bugs and not the rest of your coral. He didn't do that. He went and he goes, I have this idea. Let me see if I can make it work. And then he did a bunch of tests. And then he published saying, you know, he didn't publish. He put a forum post up on reefs.org, but it was a robust write-up of what he did, why he thinks it works, what experiments he did, what the results were of that. And you could read it and go, I follow your chain of logic, and you've done it a bunch of times, and you didn't have any death of your corals, but you did lose these crustaceans. Okay, I know to look for this now.
Yeah. And
that was great. And I think that's exactly what we're not getting with the claims about halides and the claims about UV or UVB. So I really, why am I skeptical? Because I'm not seeing compelling evidence. That doesn't mean I don't think there is compelling evidence. You know, I'd like to see some compelling evidence. I always want to be wrong. Anything nanobubbles. I wanted it to be, man, if all I have to do is put bubbles in the tank and it's going to cure ick and make my corals healthier and more colorful, and it's going to help with my, my water parameters, and, it's going to make it so I don't ever have to do water changes, and, fucking awesome. Oh, you mean all I have to do is put a clove of garlic in a bag in the tank? All I have to do is put a piece of ginger in the tank, and that's going to, yeah, of course I want all that to be true.
Yes.
But it's not. So that's, yeah. So this is probably the most interesting episode we've ever done.
No. So briefly, before we end the show, I wanted to throw in my beef real quick, because it dovetails into this. So ICP is one of those things that's always been a little bit over my head. And what has it been now? Several years ago when you and Chris Maupin wrote the article?
Yeah, 8 years now, I think.
8 years ago. So I remember when ICP was coming out, and then you and Chris Maupin wrote this article, in which we're going to link it. I know we've done it before, but we're going to do it again. You have to sit down and put on your big adult panties to read this article, even though I will tell you, Chris and Richard, there was a night a couple nights ago where I just sat down and was like, hey, I'm going to consume this again.
Nice. Thank you.
And I feel like, and I did, man, I put my feet to the fire and I read this damn article. Now, I felt like I was hanging onto a go-kart that was careening off the side of a cliff. However, y'all both, whether it was more you or more Richard, or it doesn't really matter, but y'all did chop it up to where my brain could hug some of the information, but, there was like alpha interference and beta interference, and it was explaining, and y'all, I love the way that, it wasn't trying to be adversarial to Triton Labs, because Chris knows ICP OES very intimately. Anyways, no, but, and even there was like questions to be sent to Triton, and Triton did respond to those. And there was some back and forth. Again, no one was trying to make it adversarial. There were some emotions run high in this and that. And I feel like it's still very applicable today, just the skepticism about how effective ICP testing is to our industry. Interference of things, and how often it's calibrated, and what methods they use, and what a nebulizer is used, and all this stuff that still was never, to my knowledge, never really answered,
Yeah.
So I don't want to name names, but there's a thing where people take ICP results of things, and then they start, and I like the spirit of it, to take chemicals in a bottle, or to take foods, or take this or that, and a hobbyist could that's the tricky part, is they feel like they're doing science, but there may be problems with how they're doing it. But try to get some ICP results off of a liquid in a bottle and say, hey, producer of, Miracle X stuff, we sent this in an ICP and it doesn't have this and that. I love the spirit of that. However, the missing link I don't like is I'm not comfortable with how accurate ICP is about doing this, and then manufacturers get drugged through the dirt on stuff.
What?
It just,
you mean you don't feel comfortable with, because of the the probable issues with ICP as we're using it. When manufacturer stuff gets tested with ICP and then they get shit about that because of the test with ICP.
So let me set up a vague, fast thing. So someone's using a pellet food, and then they're regularly getting ICP tests done on their tank. And they say, hey, my ICP test says I have a lot of chromium. Where would this chromium be coming from? And they try to do a process of elimination. Man, I think it's coming from that damn pellet food. And then they put on blast on the internet, man, this pellet food put a lot of chromium in my tank. And I'm just like, I'm not that comfortable with ICP being able to fish out chromium like that.
Yeah, again, it's like the Larry's Reef Frenzy, the LRS mercury thing.
Mercury gate.
Right, where somebody said it had mercury and they put it out there, and looking at the information was like, no, that's not even what it says. This is you not understanding what this is. And then LRS had to jump through a whole lot of hoops to show, because you have to, that genie was out of the bottle, and it was like, don't use LRS, it's got mercury. And it's like, no, it doesn't. And so they had to go pretty far to do it. And, I get it. I get that. But at the same time, it seems unfair, kind of lazy and unfair to make somebody else test your mind story.
Yeah.
Especially when the evidence for the mind story is pretty squinty.
My God. And more so when you have a YouTube channel and you go onto your YouTube channel and state things as fact.
Yeah, that's so tough. And, Rhett Talbot did a lot of real research into that, and it just blew it out of the water. So, yeah, I think, critical thinking and skepticism is just the most important thing in the world, because otherwise you're just, making it up. But sometimes you do have to just go with what's there. Our hobby is very strange. And on ICP testing, when we wrote that article, and I did one with Chris Jury and I did one with Kevin Erickson, I think I'm really good at translating science into English. Like, while we were writing that article, I understood everything that Chris says about ICP. And then I would write the section and make it more English, and Chris would complain that it was too English. And then I would say I would fix it, and then I would leave it more English.
But it's like making it palatable.
But yeah, but then now you ask me the details. It's like, it's not my specialty. I'm not an ICP person, but I can take what Chris was saying. I can take what Kevin was saying. I take what Chris Jury was saying and fold it in. I like that. If I was going back into a science, I'm probably better as a science communicator than as an actual scientist, because I get bored. I'm not sure about that. Shut up, Alexa.
Which is funny. It's funny. And what I like to see is someone produces some, science communicator media. And at the end, you can say something like, if you want to dive deeper into this, follow these links right here. Because, not that they say this part, but because necessarily so, I have to make it to where you don't just leave whatever this media is, because you're like, what?
Right.
I want to learn these things. I want to learn something about a wormhole or a black hole,
right?
Or a pulsar. But if you pull an astrophysicist up there talking like he's talking to another astrophysicist, I'm just like, can you chew this up for me a little bit so I can get excited with you? But I don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Right. And so when we have stuff that comes out where it feels like it's been digested for you, that's great. But you have to see if it actually has been or not. Is there actually evidence on the other side? That's what I think. And I look at ICP, and so I don't know what's going on with ICP right now. I keep seeing people saying, well, it's better now. And then I say, how is it better? And they don't get an answer.
Skeptical. Be skeptical, people.
I think it's likely that it's just been around. So now it's de facto accepted, And
this is how it happens around the water cooler at a fish tank store.
yes.
Like, oh, I watched this thing, and these two guys were saying that you should be skeptical of ICP. They say it doesn't exactly do what they say it does. And then the other person says, nah, man, they've improved. They fixed it.
Right.
Oh, okay.
If you trust that person, great. But do you trust that person, and why? So there was a last year or the year before, there was an interview with an ICP person for the hobby talking to their ICP tech. And so I sent it to a couple people I know about ICPs. And I said, this guy seems to be saying it works. It's fine for what we're doing. And he said, yeah, oh no, he's being really careful with what he's saying. He's being really careful with what he's saying. And he's not really saying what people think he's saying. And it makes sense. He's selling a product, man. Look, if the ICP company can sell more of their instruments to the hobby than they do to the science world because people are buying them, of course they're going to.
Yeah.
So it's like, and because they don't talk to each other and there's no standard, we just don't know what's going on. And every ICP company says they're doing it the best, they're the most accurate, they're the most precise, and everybody else is doing it weird. So it does me no good when an ICP professional or when somebody running the ICP company, I mean, I appreciate them talking, but they're all saying the same thing.
I wish they would be more transparent, because here's the deal. Most people can't even afford an ICP OES.
Yeah,
so
it's
it
like
doesn't matter.
$100,000.
It doesn't matter if you told me exactly what the fuck you're doing. You're not going to have that much competition.
But well, no, it's not even that. They're not scared about talking about what they're doing. I don't think. It's just a process. If somebody else can do the same process, go. Yeah,
but in your article, and I don't know if this is it changed since then, it's like, y'all were asking, what shape nebulizer do you use? And are you taking into account alpha and beta interference? And that was all never answered.
Right. But, and if the answer comes back, oh, we're doing something proprietary, it's like, okay, show me the evidence that it's doing what you say it's doing. You're doing something no one else does. You have a high bar of compelling evidence to present to support that idea. And so we're in a bit of a weeds section now. People are seeing correlation and causation about following ICP and having it result in a good tank. And we've talked about this before. I think what that is any reef methodology. If you and I were to write out a recipe for how to start your tank and what to do at every step and how to deal with everything. And then if they came back and kept asking questions and we would tell them what to do, I think they'd probably be fine. I think almost any method will be fine. Whether adding all the trace elements or anything has anything to any good or bad yet, I don't know. I don't see evidence on it. The one that kills me is I'm going to start adding cobalt because the colors are supposed to be. I mean, this is just like way back to 2000s, in the 2000s, I added Reef Vital DNA and the colors are better. It's just mind story. We need something more than that if we're going to invest all this time and money. Although now that I say that, maybe we don't. Maybe people just really want recipes. It doesn't matter what the recipe is as long as it produces. And we know that the bulk of the recipes are going to produce. Yeah, and so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe education is not the way to go. Maybe setting up a system where people ask you what to do and you tell them what to do and then they do it, maybe that will produce a lot of success. It totally could. But,
This reminds me of other aquarium maintenance professionals and I, when we start to talk, and, for decades now, I've talked to, other peers and we're like, oh, what's like the perfect setup? Or like, man, if I could only make a setup that's like, I just do that setup all the time. What's your setup? Maybe it's not there. It's not there.
It's not there.
Not like that.
No, our hobby is not like that. And our hobby has always been so science adjacent, and we've always had so much access to science people that we feel like it's more science than it is. And we have public aquariums doing science, but they're not doing the, they're not doing the kind of stuff we're doing in our tanks. They're doing science. I guess one of the aquariums is going to do a UV study to see if it makes a difference in when they return corals out to the ocean. That makes sense to me. That seems like an acclimation issue. Not that I don't think it's going to show if UV is actually beneficial or not. But we'll see. We haven't seen the data yet. And nobody from that institution is running around going, "Hey, we're doing this study." You know what I mean? They're the little bit they say about it, they're being cagey about it, and rightfully so.
I was about to say, but boom, that's how it's supposed to go. You don't talk about your experiment while you're doing it.
Right. And if you do, you're very careful, and you usually say things like, "I'm getting ahead of myself. Wait, we got to see if this pans out."
Yeah.
And with Mind Stories, that's the exact opposite. We don't get that. I'm interrupting you. I got one more thing.
Okay.
If we're in this fucking rabbit hole, I'm going to do it too. I love aquabiomics testing.
Okay.
But I don't know what utility it has yet. Right? I think it will likely become eDNA testing and microbiome testing will likely become very, very useful in the future when we have a lot more data and a lot more good information. To say that, these number of tanks had this microbiome, it's like, I need to know if it's a good tank or not. So I need some kind of scale of tank, right? There's a bunch of stuff I need. And I can see if you were doing long-term QT, like some vendors are doing, like months QT, because these tests are not fast, right?
Yeah. So
you'd be treating fish, you're treating them what you think they've got, because clearly they've got something. You've done your treatment, you've sent a sample in, 3 weeks later, it comes back and it tells you what might actually be in the water, what the pathogen or pest might be. Great. If you were right at the beginning, you continue on your treatment. If you were wrong, you swerve, right? But you're already in it for months of QT.
That let me pause you real quick. That only makes sense for a public aquarium. That makes no sense for a business.
The businesses are trying to do it, and they're going to keep trying to do it. And we don't know if it's going to work out or not.
Here's your yellowtail blue damsel, ma'am. That's going to be $150.
But we used, you could use that argument to go to bag lot sales and just roll your dice and hope. So I think there's a market for it.
Well, and if it did evolve, if the results could be found quicker and so on and so forth, that if this did evolve to like get a batch of fish in, where are all the pathogens here? Boom, 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 knock them out. Boom, boom. So, okay. So that's a cool place to end up at.
Yeah. And that and ICP testing could end up being the cat's meow. They could end up being exactly what people are using them for now. But right now, I was a little too squinty on aquabiomics for a while, and going, God, I feel really weird paying money for them to get a database so they could charge more people money. And I'm not really getting much from this right now. But there's lots of stuff that we throw money at in the hobby because we think eventually it's going to be something useful. So I'm totally okay with people chucking money at aquabiomics because they're curious.
Well, can that be?
The only place I get scared is when people take action. It says that I've got 0.03% cryptocarian in my tank, and they're going to run it again because they ran it the wrong way, but they can do it again. That's fine, because if it doesn't show acro-eating flatworms in my system, I'm going to squint. But, I really don't know. And the documentation that I've looked at doesn't tell me anything about what 0.03% crypto is. Is that bad? Is it good? Should I do anything? It's really, okay. So now I kind of, there's crypto. There's some level of crypto in my tank. I pretty much knew that, that I had concluded that already. But if I was a 1-year hobbyist and it came back and it said I've got crypto in my tank, I might think I need to restart the whole thing. So I want aquabiomics to be awesome. And I actually think that kind of testing will end up being awesome. And now I'm okay with people chucking money at it, and talking about really what's actionable and what isn't, and what realistic expectations you can have from it. The same way I would want to be happening with the ICP. Now, there's only one place right now doing the microbiome testing for the hobby, so it's a little easier to talk to them. There's 1,000 ICP companies, they're not talking to each other. So I'm even more confused about what's going on in that realm.
Well, and the part that grosses me out on ICP is because, just like you said, every single one of them says, oh, no, we're doing it different.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so how are you doing it? Well, this is proprietary. Go fuck yourself.
And everyone's got their favorite. I asked somebody, they said, somebody I know said, it's the only, this company's the only one I trust. And I was like, why do you trust them? Like, boom. Right. So already I'm a dick, right?
You know, and when the dust settles, maybe they're right, but I'm just not.
Yeah.
I'm too skeptical for that.
They had a couple of reasons why they trust him. I'm like, okay, those are decent reasons, but they're not getting to the heart of the matter, I don't think.
So, dear reader and dear listener, don't be a cynical dick. Be a skeptical, critical thinker, and just don't take things at face value. Make these manufacturers of products and ideas, make them work for these things. Don't just, believe someone just because they're a personality. I mean, here at Reef Beef, we're not trying to sell you anything yet, but if we ever do, make us exercise for it.
And don't take glee in other people being wrong.
Yeah.
That's not what it's about. Don't raise your own status by using skepticism to lower somebody else's status. Oh, that's good. I've never thought this before. This is great. This is the core of it. We get together and we dish on other people because it gives us our own little status bump, which is fine. That's a behavioral thing and I understand it. I think as a skeptic, you need to be careful. We don't want to take glee about somebody being wrong. We want them to be right. And if they're wrong, we want to say, thanks for the try. Let's move on so we can all get better. So it's not about being skeptic. Skepticism isn't about showing people they're wrong. Skepticism is a method to help us get at a better understanding of the truth or reality. It's not a competition. It's not a weapon. It's not something to beat other people with. It's a tool to bring us forward as a group altogether.
Tear down bad ideas. Don't tear down people.
And don't take glee in tearing the bad ideas down. Just tear them down. It's a bad idea. Ben, I think your hair looks terrible. No, that's the exact opposite of what I was saying. So yeah, be kind, as Jim Graham was telling. Be kind. The skepticism is not a fight. It's a way for all of us to move forward.
And that's our show. Thank you to saltwateraquarium.com. Thank you to PolypLab. And thank you to Champion Lighting and Supply. If you liked what you heard and saw here, please continue and go to our Discord and become a member and become a beefer.
And if you didn't like it, keep it to yourself. Why should you be the only one who has to watch this crap?
Stay moist.
Okay, that's it.
All right, that's it.
Time to go praise Jesus.
Yep, let's go worship God.
Yeah.
Right in the face. It's like a reggae octopus. Are you like that dude on Futurama?
Zoidberg. Okay.
I like it.
This is either really funny or we're kidnapping you.
Yes, totally. My name is Ben. Wait. Silence across the land. Okay. So the deal is on this show, we cuss a little bit. So if cussing is like a deal breaker to you, then I'm sorry, but it's just what we do.
Put on your big boy reef pants. I
Put on
can't
your
wear
reef
this. I can't wear this and talk.
Because you can't talk?
Okay. Do the intro and then I'll take it off. Wait, hold on one sec. Oh, okay. That was weird. My mic. No, hold on one sec. My mic's doing something weird. What the fuck? Oh God, I'm sorry, Snowman.
So, Richard, there's skepticism and there
wait,
is...
before we launch into this, okay, just a note to talk to Snowman.
So, dear listener and dear reader, it's time for Richard to hush. No.
Yeah, we went too long again.
Yeah.